Hello, everyone. I'm Brandon Lewis with the Tennessee Conservative News, the volunteer state's largest conservative news alternative. Today, we are joined by Representative Ragan to talk about a very serious issue that is disenfranchising GOP primary voters all over the state. It's the current position, as far as I can tell, of GOP leadership in the General Assembly to allow Democrats to continue to vote in Republican primaries. Crossover voting decides dozens of critical races in Tennessee in the favor of Democrats and liberal rhino Republicans every single cycle. Today, we're going to have a serious discussion on this topic and tell you how you can reach out to your SEC committee members to see if we can finally get an end to Democrats selecting the GOP nominee in Tennessee. Representative Ragan, thank you for fighting this, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
All right, well, let's get right into it. Can we start this interview? Because I want to get down to facts and not, me just venting my frustration with the lack of the ability to stop crossover voting. Can we start this interview by talking about how the TNGOP bylaws defines a Democrat crossover vote?
Well, in actuality, it does not define a crossover vote. That term is used as a general description to describe someone who votes in a primary in which he's not a member of the party that's conducting the primary. Now, the operative word, I guess, really is not crossover voting, but illegal voting, because the Tennessee Republican Party bylaws define what is a bona fide Republican. And Tennessee Code 2-7-115 specifies that it's a crime for someone to vote in a primary of the party of which they are not a bona fide member. Now, I can quote you that verbiage directly if you want, but that's in a nutshell. The bylaws do define what is a bona fide member, though. And of course, you can look this up online, Tennessee Republican Party bylaws, and it'll come up with everything that's in there. Article 9 is where this is defined. And it essentially says that there are some criteria you have to meet. Specifically, you must be actively involved in the Tennessee Republican Party. And it tells you what it means to be actively involved. Attending party meetings, regular county meeting attendance, be a member of a recognized auxiliary organization like the Federation of Republican Women or the Young Republicans Club, etc., for at least a year, and working on a campaign of a Republican candidate to office in the most recent, and it specifies most recent election cycle. And it also says that contributions of money to the county party, the state party, or to a candidate can fit into that. But then it's got a big and. In other words, all those things, and you have to have voted in at least 3 out of the last 4 most recent statewide Republican primary contests. So that's the definition of a bona fide Republican. And that is what the law says. The law says you have to be a bona fide member. Otherwise, the vote you're casting is illegal. So rather than talk about crossover, which comes to mean different things to different people, what we need to be discussing is whether or not those votes should be counted at all. And under the law, which was passed in 2023, I believe Representative Elaine Davis was the prime sponsor in the House on that one. And that law basically put into place that criteria that I just mentioned. And it was as a result of what went on in Middle Tennessee. There was the congressional 5th district race. Lots of skullduggery and shall we say, less than upright activities going on there. And this law was intended to counter that. That issue, though, crossover versus illegal, by definition, a crossover vote by someone who's not a member of that party that's conducting the primary is an illegal vote.
So if you look at this criteria that is written in the GOP bylaws, and it sounds to me like, just hearing what you've said, it sounds to me like what happened is a state law was passed that has teeth. It refers back to the bylaws of a bona fide status, but maybe the Tennessee GOP did not amend what it means to be bona fide, and probably now may be looking at something that is an unintended consequence of not better defining what bona fide is. We'll see how that plays out. How many crossover votes did you find, or how many illegal votes did you find for both your race, for you as a candidate, and for your competitor's race. How many votes did you find on both sides? What were the totals, and how does that compare to the difference in your election outcome?
Well, it's you can't tell which vote was cast because it's a secret ballot. You can only tell the people that voted, and available in every county election commission office is a disc, if you want to go buy it, that has a list of all the voters and all the primaries that they voted in uh, for the past period of time. I think it goes back maybe 8 or 9 years. Uh, but it's very easy to do. You can download that into an Excel spreadsheet and then do some simple manipulations like sorts and data filtering, and it will tell you which voters did not vote in the requisite number of primaries prior to the one you're looking at to be qualified as a bona fide candidate, or pardon me, bona fide voter in that primary. And the straightforward answer to your question that you asked was I found 1,135, that's 1,135 votes in my primary that didn't fit that criteria. Now, there were more. I quit looking after I found that many, to be honest with you, because that's almost 20% of the total votes cast, which should be enough in anybody's book to invalidate the election.
So, what are the stated remedies if illegal votes are found in the Tennessee bylaws? Let's say that the committee looks at this and they say, okay, the law says this, the bylaws say that, therefore, these people are not bona fide and can't vote in the primary. Now, that is a grand departure from what has happened in Tennessee historically. But if it's in writing and if that's how it's supposed to be, we need to follow that. What are the remedies for this? I
Well,
mean, obviously they would maybe throw the votes out, and what's the process for that?
well, the first one is no remedy. In other words, let the election stand. The second one is to set it aside, and that's a legal term, set aside the election, which basically means invalidate it. And if they invalidate it, then they have some options about choosing a candidate. Now, the law is very clear that the candidate is selected by the party. There was a case involving a Democrat, believe it or not, back in 2008, I believe, a state senator, Carita, in Middle Tennessee again. Funny how they seem to plow the ground for problems. But the Tennessee Democrat Party had a contest. They claimed Republicans crossed over, which may have been the case. But anyway, they invalidated that election or set it aside. And then they voted and put her opponent in as their nominee. So that the state party has the power to do that. They could also, again, no limitations on them, they could convene a convention. Now, the convention would have to be of the district or area where that election took place, or they could tell the county executive party to make the choice. So they've got three options that are obvious. One is they decide it themselves. Two is they can kick it to the county executive party. Or three is they could order the party to hold a convention. Now, there's a time limit that they have to deal with because the names have to be specified for ballot production. I believe it's by September the 14th or 15th, something like that. And so essentially, by delaying this to the 7th, which wasn't entirely their doing, to be honest with you, but by delaying it that long, they backed themselves into a corner on dates. Holding an outright convention probably can't be done in the length of time they've got to do it. But that's going to be their decision, not mine.
So, there are illegal crossover votes as defined in the GOP primary, which are the same, apparently, from listening to you read them. It's the same to run and the same to vote. I mean,
Well,
basically.
Again, the party probably, as you pointed out, did not anticipate having to define a bona fide Republican for the purpose of being a candidate versus being a voter. There is only one definition. And of course, in that definition, they're kind of implying candidate, but they don't say that it's just candidate. So it has to apply across the board.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And here's the issue. And I've said this before. Why are we holding candidates to a higher standard than we hold voters?
Well,
And
that's
we see it all the time. And also we see it very often when the Republican Party wants to pick winners and losers. And they'll invalidate somebody who they don't want to run based upon the bona fide. They got like 15 different ways they can slip out of it. And if there's some rhino that's been slated to be appointed or run, they'll excuse it. But if it's a conservative, in most cases, that's going to challenge an incumbent, they won't touch it. They'll stand by the. So it's very devious and deceptive what I have seen in the vouching process, etc. If they want to build trust and transparency, there needs to be one uniform set of rules laid out for everyone, and either you make the cut or you don't. This subjective vouching stuff is what erodes trust between the GOP and the grassroots in many cases. So we know that according to the law and according to the bylaws that there are tons of votes that need to be thrown out. There's no telling how many they would discover if they use these true bona fide credentials. But did you see any interesting data as you looked at the votes on just how many people voted in your primary that, say, had perhaps voted in 3 of the last 4 Democrat primaries?
Well, the answer straightforwardly is yes. There were over 190 what people who qualified. By the way, the Democrat Party has their own qualifications for being a bona fide Democrat, and it's voting in 3 out of the last 5. Pardon me, is that right? Yeah, 3 out of the last 5 Democrat primaries. And by their criteria, there were over 190 people that voted in my primary that were quote unquote bona fide Democrats. Now, the real rub comes in that it's not just those votes that need to be considered, because there were plenty of people who had voted in Democrat primaries, just hadn't voted 3 times or more in the previous 5, but they had obviously still voted maybe 2 or even just once in the party, not the Republican Party, and then they hadn't voted at all until this primary. There were 200, I'm sorry, let me think, 240, yes, 240 votes in this primary of people who had not voted at all, except in general elections and in long gone primaries. In other words, no vote in the last 4 primaries until this primary. And then they turned out. It strains credulity, to be honest with you. And then you add to that the 390 or so that had voted Democrat in at least 3 and not voted at all, or 2 or 3 or 4 of the last Democrat, I didn't look at the 5th one, primaries, and not voted anywhere else. In other words, they hadn't voted for a Republican primary. They'd only voted in Democrat primaries. When you add those 2 numbers together, that's more than double the vote difference between my opponent and me. So the issue becomes not just those that were bona fide Democrats by the Democrat definition, but those who had been sit on the sidelines and maybe had been Democrats long before and were suddenly, oh, I'm going to slip into this. They don't fit that criteria, so they become an illegal voter.
So, well, I'll tell you, first thing, I appreciate you having the cover your ears if you're with your kids, the testicular fortitude. I was going to say something else to freaking bring this challenge. And I've heard over and over again, I'm telling you, I have had SEC committee members, David Queen comes to mind, Mark Harrison, who's our GOP chair, have argued with me about how awesome it is and how necessary it is to have Democrats voting in Republican primaries. I mean, there is a buried yet not publicly stated mentality in many Republicans that that's a good thing for us, primarily rhinos and moderates. And in the past, we have watched, I think, just since we've been reporting and starting in 2000, we've seen rhinos kill every piece of legislation that's gone through committee to close the primaries in a more official fashion. Gary Hicks and John Crawford are probably the 2 worst. If you want to lay the blame at anybody's feet, it would be them. Dale Carr, John Holtzclaw, Esther Hayes Helton. They've all got bad votes on this. In the Senate, Richard Briggs, John Stevens, Paige Wally, Ed Jackson want Democrats voting in Republican primaries. As far as I can tell, we've never seen Cameron Sexton or Andy McNally or Bill Lee call for the closing of primaries, I think primarily because they know it helps their candidates. And that's all my opinion. That's just my opinion. It is not your opinion. What is your opinion about why leadership continues to I mean, you know how it is. It's all top down in the General Assembly from everything I've seen. I've seen no independent thinking there. It's all very top down with a few
Well,
conservative exceptions.
not
Why
all of
are
it.
they trying to kill these bills?
Well, again, your rationale is as good as any because I haven't discussed the issue with them personally, so I can't represent what they think. From my perspective, I have supported. There's been three of those votes that I can remember off the top of my head, going all the way back to 109th General Assembly, when the late Representative Judd Matheny carried a bill, and I was recruited to be a co-sponsor on. And then one after that, let's see, with Representative Andy Holt, and then most recently, I think with Representative Tim Rudd, uh, and they all failed to get out of committee. And
Well, you're talking about three that was before our time, and I'm talking about three that's been since our time, which means there's been six since you've been in there, all of which have been defeated.
and again, I have lent my support to those things as much as I could, not being in one of the committees that they come through. All you can do now, you can fill out a piece of paper that says I want to be a co-sponsor, but most of the time the sponsor really doesn't file those bills unless it gets out of committee. File those papers because unless you are going to fill in for that guy or gal in one of the committees, they're going to be absent, or they think you'll do a better job in a particular committee. Being a co-sponsor at that point is kind of ho-hum. It's when it comes to the floor that being a co-sponsor is kind of important there. All that aside, though, to your point directly, why this doesn't get done, all I can tell you is, and from my perspective, I don't join an organization halfway. I join it all the way. And frankly, I want those people who are in that organization to have done the same thing that I have, committed to it completely. Those people who are tepid, if you will, half in and half out, I don't have a lot of use for. And that's just my personal opinion. I think if you're in it, you're in it. Now, we can have disagreements of opinion. Don't misunderstand me. We have those all the time within the party about what issues are best to support and what not, so forth and so on. And debates and disagreements happen. That is the nature of politics. But that said, you either adhere to one or the other. Now, if you're going to be an independent, well, fine, be an independent. You don't play with either one. And the only time you get to vote is in a general election. But if you're in either party and you have a disagreement over a party position, you stand up at that time and you make it known and you do your best to convince your fellow party members to go along with you. If you can't, then you go along with them. That's the nature of a representative republic. Now, sorry, today's sermon's over.
Yeah, that's very good.
But from the standpoint of why it doesn't pass the General Assembly, I can't tell you.
Well, 98, when we poll and survey, and we've got, to my understanding, we have the largest list of conservatives in the state of Tennessee of almost any organization, if not any organization. And we stay in touch with people more than any other organization because they rely upon us for their news. We're not just occasionally talking to them about pet issues. Instead, we are communicating with them 6-7 days a week, every single day through, reaching millions of people in some months. About very specific issues. And when we polled our subscribers and folks that follow conservative politics on social media and combined nature, like 98%. And I mean, we had a sample size of, I can't remember, 1,800 people. 98% want the Democrats to not be able to vote in Republican primaries. Leadership knows this, but they fail to do anything about it. Who specifically, I would just like to know, worked against you in your race, organizations, PACs, individuals, etc.? Why do you think you were targeted in the primary, given your conservative voting record? I broke ties with quite a few organizations this time around in the election cycle because they targeted what I consider to be an endangered species in Tennessee, and that's a conservative in the General Assembly. And so when they come after those endangered species, I will not have anything to do with them. Who worked against you in this race?
Well, one PAC in particular, obviously my opponent, that goes without saying. One PAC in particular, Team for Kids or Team Kids, which is associated with, I think, Tennesseans for Student Success. They ran a very, very negative mail campaign, and just counting the number of mailers that were sent out, and I don't know exactly how many. This is based on feedback that was given to me. They probably spent well over 70, 80, maybe even $100,000 running a negative campaign against me. And again, from that perspective, I don't recall if any member of that organization, either the PAC, certainly not the PAC, but certainly the organization which is associated with it, coming in and to my office and saying, we want you to support this or not that. Lobbyists parade through there all the time. So I would have expected if they were going to stand that strongly against me to have known why. And frankly, I don't to this day.
Well, one thing that I have been doing, I'm going to ask one more question, and then give you the last word. But I put together that Conservative Candidates Academy, and we got a few in there from that this time around. But for conservatives in the General Assembly, I hope that in the spring they'll attend it, because honestly, if we can win with a conservative message while outspent 20-1 in District 27 with Michelle Renault's race against Patsy Hazelwood, I don't see why conservative incumbents, if they run a really good, professional, modern, decently funded, not even more than the people that are coming up against you, that we can't put up some political palisades around our conservative champions. Because I'm an old campaign hand, and I take that stuff very seriously as a former professional, and I'm still, obviously still have a little bit of what it takes to get the job done. And so I want to make sure that we can protect folks like you that are in the Senate and in the House. What can our subscribers do to help you in this effort and finally end the scourge of Democrats choosing the GOP nominee in Tennessee?
Well, directly, your subscribers can contact the State Executive Committee, the Tennessee Republican State Executive Committee, which in this case functions as the state primary board. Now, it's the same people, but two different names. And the reason that's important is when they are functioning in the state primary board mode, they have to have open meetings, and by the Tennessee Open Meetings Law, and they have to allow public comment. When they're the State Executive Committee, they're a political animal, and they don't have to do that. They can have closed meetings. But as the state primary board, they have to have that. And now, they haven't officially put out notice. Unofficially, I think they've specified they're going to do it on the 7th of September in Mount Juliet, I believe. But all that is I haven't received official notice as of yet. The unofficial word is, I believe, the Hilton Garden Inn at 2:30 on the 7th, but that's not official. That's just, what was bounced around. I expect to get an official notice after Labor Day. As far as that's concerned, in contacting them, the website has a list of all the executive party members, or they can send it directly to Scott Golden at Golden what is it, tngop.org. I believe that's right.
Yeah. So here's what I'd recommend, if you're out there listening. Number one, Jason, when we publish this, I just want the list to be below the video and in any articles we do so people can easily access it. If you're watching this video, look in or around it. If it's a podcast, it's going to be in the show notes. If it's an article, it's going to be below the video. If it's on social media, it's going to be in the comments. So you will be able to find these phone numbers around this video somewhere if you look. That's how we often do it with legislative issues. Contact your SEC committee members. Tell them that you're watching and you want to see which SEC committee members allow Democrats to choose Republican nominees and which ones don't. And we're going to publish a list of how the SEC votes on this, John, I'm telling you, and I'm going to include it. This is closed circuit transmission to the SEC. I'm just so fed up with this stuff. If we can't get justice one way, I'll get it another. And we're going to put it in the Rhino report this year. This vote's going in the Rhino report. And we'll dedicate a whole page to it. So if you want to be in the column that wants Democrats to vote in Republican primaries, don't look at the evidence, pass this thing along, continue to pass the buck. But if you're tired of this, and if you look at this, and if you see that the word of law and the bylaws should be in concordance with one another, then you need to look at the votes that are illegal in both races, see where the votes finally fall, and then get started on it. John, you've been very kind with your time. I'll let you have the last word.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And by the way, the vote is not certain yet. They may have set the election aside. So if they do, good on them. But if not, so be it. My first year at the Air Force Academy, I was required to memorize a lot of things. But there's two in particular I want to call to your attention. The first was the honor code. We will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those among us who do. And the second was a quote from Robert E. Lee. You should do your duty in all things. You can never do more, and you should never want to do less. Bluntly stated, this illegal vote cheating that's evident in this election contest is intolerable to me. In other words, I won't tolerate it sitting down. Consequently, I have done my duty by bringing this contest to the attention of the state executive party. becomes now their duty to weigh the evidence and, in my opinion, go with the rule of law, not the rule of men. The rule of law is clear. Illegal voting should not decide an election, period. Dot, end. Beyond that, this attitude that's out there that we need non-party members in our primaries is, to me, the surest way to hurt our party in the long run. Our party has to stand for integrity. It has to stand for principle. And the principle of being a bona fide Republican is specified in writing in their bylaws. And it's in the Tennessee Code annotated that they can't vote if they're not a bona fide member. And with that, I'll close by saying that, excuse me, that I've done my duty as the good Lord gave me the light to see it and the strength to carry it out. And that's all that I ask of others.
Well, I appreciate you very much, guys. If you're on the SEC committee, look at the evidence. I strongly believe that if this is overturned and if justice is served, we might even get, and I've heard rumors that William Lambert may be trying to carry a bill, we might finally get GO leadership to get behind closing these primaries in a more official capacity if indeed this turns into what I hope it does, which is justice being rendered. And God knows the General Assembly does not want the party to be in control. They want to be in control. So if the party controls this time around, I think it puts them on notice that it could happen again, and other candidates will be aware of it and use this same mechanism to challenge Democrats voting in Republican primaries. So guys, look below here, contact your SEC committee members and say, we want the Democrats out. Go by the rule of law. I've enjoyed talking to you, Mr. Ragan. Thank you for your time. And if you are listening to this and you've enjoyed this interview, please search for Tennessee Conservative wherever you get your podcasts, social media, online, and subscribe at TennesseeConservativeNews.com. Until next time, I'm Brandon Lewis, signing off.